Look around the room you're in right now, at work, at the gym, in that cafe where everyone pretends they're focused while quietly absorbing every word around them. Statistically, more of the people near you than ever before will never get married. Not because they're undesirable, not because they lack social skills, not because something is broken inside them, but because they chose not to. And that choice is slowly dismantling one of the oldest promises humanity ever wrapped itself around, the idea of happily ever after. For most of history, marriage wasn't about passion or destiny. It was about staying alive. It was a structure, a pact, a system designed to pool risk, labor, protection, bloodlines. You didn't marry because someone completed you. You married because the world was unforgiving and survival was rarely a solo act. But something unprecedented is unfolding now. A shift not just in culture, but in the human psyche. Where being single past a certain age once signaled failure, shame, or tragedy, it's starting to signal something else entirely: control, freedom, even status. And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Many aren't postponing marriage. They're deliberately opting out, choosing self-direction over tradition, stability over attachment, peace over partnership. So what changed? Was it dating apps, economic pressure, emotional burnout, or watching our parents tear each other apart in courtrooms and kitchens? Or is it deeper than that? Something wired into how modern brains now interpret safety and love. Because for a growing number of people, marriage doesn't feel like devotion. It feels like a constraint. And the most unsettling truth is this: many of them aren't lonely. They're not lost. They're not missing anything. They're asking a question our culture still doesn't know how to answer. What if the one isn't a person, but a life you refuse to reduce? Today, we're breaking down the psychology of those who choose not to marry and what that choice quietly reveals about all of us. For the vast majority of human history, marriage wasn't a fantasy. It was infrastructure. It was the mechanism that kept people fed, protected, connected. You didn't stand at an altar chasing emotional fulfillment. You entered a contract because life was brutal, resources were scarce, disease was common, and isolation was a death sentence. Marriage meant shared work, shared defense, shared lineage. In many cultures, love was optional, stability was not. So when people say marriage is natural, they're not entirely wrong. But what they're really describing is necessity. Marriage didn't thrive because it was romantic. It thrived because it was required. And that's the part modern minds struggle to feel in their bones, because the conditions that made marriage essential have quietly disappeared. Today, for the first time in history, millions of adults can survive on their own. You can earn a living without a spouse, build a future without a partner, experience intimacy without permanence and connection without legal fusion. Survival is no longer the central problem, meaning is. And that single shift changes everything. Marriage has moved from being a survival tool to being an identity decision. It's no longer about how do we endure life together. It's about, does this structure align with who I'm becoming? And once marriage becomes about identity instead of necessity, it stops being automatic. It becomes optional. And the moment something becomes optional, people finally feel allowed to ask the question they were never supposed to ask before. Do I actually want this? Or was I just trained to believe I should? This is where the conversation splits, because not everyone who chooses to stay single is doing it for the same reason. On the surface, it looks identical. Same independence, same routines, same calm declaration of being fine alone. But psychologically, there are two very different versions of freedom hiding underneath that lifestyle. The first is healthy autonomy. This is someone who genuinely functions well on their own. They enjoy their space, their pace, their priorities. They're not avoiding intimacy, and they're not threatened by closeness. They can attach, commit, and love deeply, but they refuse to confuse marriage with achievement. Their independence feels steady, open, expansive. Being single isn't a shield for them. It's an intentional design choice. Then there's the second kind, avoidant autonomy. From the outside, it looks just as strong. but it's driven by fear rather than clarity. Not the shallow fear of missing out or wanting endless options, but a more sophisticated response. This is someone whose nervous system links closeness with danger. So instead of saying, "I'm scared," they say, "I'm independent." Instead of saying, "I don't trust," they say, "I don't need anyone." And here's the difference that gives it away. Healthy autonomy creates growth. Avoidant autonomy creates control. One is chosen to expand life. The other is chosen to prevent pain. They're not rejecting marriage because it's limiting. They're rejecting it because it's vulnerable. You can usually tell which one you're dealing with by asking a single question. When love starts to get close, when someone wants to merge lives and build a future, do you feel calm? Or do you feel that quiet tightening in your chest that whispers, "I'm about to disappear"? One version of freedom is power. The other is armor. So why does being single feel genuinely good for some people? Not tolerable, not manageable, but alive, focused, clear. The answer lives inside the brain's reward system, and it has everything to do with what your nervous system has learned to chase. For most of human history, humans were wired to prioritize oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It's released through touch, trust, attachment, closeness. Oxytocin tells the brain, "This person is safe, stay here." In a dangerous world, bonding meant protection, stability, shared survival. Pairing wasn't romantic first, it was practical, and our brains learned to reward it. But the world shifted. Today, survival doesn't depend on a partner. It depends on income, skills, access, mobility. And for many modern adults, the brain's reward hierarchy has quietly changed. Instead of being primarily driven by oxytocin and merging, some people are more driven by dopamine. Dopamine isn't pleasure, it's pursuit. It activates with progress, novelty, momentum, control. And look at what single life offers through that lens. Total autonomy, new experiences, no negotiations, no compromises, no late-night emotional check-ins over a misread tone. You control your schedule, your goals, your silence, and for a dopamine-oriented nervous system, that doesn't feel empty. It feels like oxygen. So when autonomy becomes associated with reward, commitment starts to register as loss. Not because love is harmful, but because freedom has been wired as safety. For these people, staying single isn't a failure to bond. It's a different kind of bond, one with independence, direction, and self-authorship. And once the brain learns that association, it doesn't easily let go. Now we arrive at the reason that rarely gets named, because it's quieter and harder to confront. For a huge number of people, especially millennials and older Gen Z, this isn't just about freedom. It's about fear that was learned, not chosen. If you grew up in the late 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, there's a strong chance you were raised in the shadow of divorce. You didn't just hear about it. You lived inside its consequences. You watched love decay into legal documents. You watched tension turn into resentment, resentment into explosions. You watched the people who promised forever suddenly treat each other like enemies. And most damaging of all, you watched the home, the place meant to be safe, become unstable. That kind of exposure doesn't stay emotional. It programs the nervous system. Psychologists call it vicarious trauma. When witnessing someone else's pain trains your brain to expect the same outcome for yourself. Without anyone ever saying it, your system absorbs a rule. Marriage is not safety. Marriage is risk. So as an adult, you may want love. You may crave closeness. You may even meet someone genuinely good for you. But the moment the relationship starts moving toward permanence, something inside tightens. A quiet alarm, a sudden calculation, a voice that says, "Don't build your life around another person because when it falls apart, it will take you with it." This is where the fear of marriage takes root, not as a phobia, but as a strategy. If commitment looks like a bomb you've already seen explode, then staying single doesn't feel empty. It feels intelligent. It feels safe. And that's the tragedy. Many people aren't rejecting marriage because they don't believe in love. They're rejecting it because they've already seen what love can become. This is where a lot of people get misread because society is quick to label them cold, distant, selfish, emotionally unavailable. But what if that interpretation misses the point entirely? What if they aren't detached but overloaded? People with an avoidant attachment style don't avoid love because they feel nothing. They avoid it because their nervous system experiences closeness as too much. They can handle connection in fragments, dates, chemistry, laughter, long conversations that stretch past midnight. But the moment a relationship starts to solidify into a life, the moment someone asks where this is going or talks about a future, the body reacts before the mind can catch up. The chest tightens, sleep becomes restless, irritation appears out of nowhere. The urge to pull back feels urgent, almost physical. And it isn't manipulation. It isn't a game. It's a subconscious alarm sounding danger, dependence, loss of control, future pain. So they do what their system learned early. They create distance. Sometimes that looks like vanishing right as things deepen. Sometimes it looks like suddenly fixating on small flaws in an otherwise healthy partner. Not because the flaws matter, but because escape does. And here's the part that hurts the most. Avoidant protectors often want love deeply. They just don't trust the price of attachment. Their independence isn't always confidence. Sometimes it's armor, because if you never fully attach, you never fully lose. And if you never fully lose, you never have to relive the pain your system promised it would never allow again. Now pull back from attachment patterns and childhood wiring and look at the modern arena where all of this plays out. Your phone. Because even for people who genuinely want partnership, dating today doesn't feel like romance. It feels like consumption. Dating apps didn't just change how people meet. They reshaped how people evaluate. Psychologist Barry Schwartz called it the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the less satisfied you feel, because every selection comes with the question of what you might be missing. In the past, love lived within limits. You met people through the work, friends, school, proximity. Your pool was small, human, finite. When you chose someone, you invested. Now, you carry thousands of possibilities in your pocket, and your brain responds to that like a casino. Swipe, match, dopamine, swipe, match, dopamine. You're no longer just meeting people, you're collecting potential. And that subtly retrains the brain to stay in pursuit mode. Commitment requires tolerance for imperfection. Swipe culture erodes that tolerance. It trains people to become maximizers, always scanning for the optimal choice instead of the real one. So relationships start with audits instead of curiosity. Is their lifestyle impressive enough? Are they attractive enough? Do they text correctly? Is there one trait that might bother me forever? When options feel endless, any flaw becomes a justification to keep searching. Not because the person is wrong, but because they're not perfect. That's how the perfect match illusion forms. People aren't rejecting love. They're trapped in evaluation mode, convinced the missing 10% is one swipe away. And when love turns into a marketplace, commitment starts to feel like closing the browser while the internet still has a million tabs open. Then we arrive at one of the strangest signals of all. Not just choosing to stay single, not just rejecting marriage, but marrying yourself. A practice known as sologamy. Full ceremonies, white dresses, rings, vows made to no one but the mirror. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss it as narcissism or performance, but psychologically, something much more specific is happening. An old narrative is being rewritten. For centuries, the message was clear. You are incomplete until someone chooses you. Sologamy flips that script and says, I am already whole. For some people, that declaration is genuinely reparative. It's a ritual of self-claiming, a way of marking worth without waiting for external validation. But here's the part that rarely gets examined. Not all self-partnering is rooted in self-love. Sometimes, I don't need anyone is strength. And sometimes it's a wound speaking in fluent confidence. It can mean I am complete, or it can quietly mean I cannot survive another abandonment. So sologamy isn't the punchline, it's the signal. A cultural marker that the shame once attached to being single is dissolving, and being chosen by yourself is becoming a new kind of status. Not tragic, not pathetic, almost defiant. Now we need to dismantle the most persistent myth in this entire conversation. That people who don't marry are automatically lonely, because loneliness and solitude are not the same experience. Loneliness is a wound. It's the feeling of being unseen, unsupported, emotionally hungry while surrounded by people. Solitude is different. Solitude can be chosen. It's being alone without feeling abandoned. It's enjoying your own company. It's having space to think, create, recover, and build a relationship with yourself that actually feels stable. Research consistently shows that many single people aren't isolated at all. They often maintain stronger friendships, deeper community ties, and wider social networks. Meanwhile, many married couples slowly collapse their world inward, shrinking their connections until almost everything runs through one person. So no, being single doesn't automatically equal disconnection. But there is a quieter truth that also needs to be said. There can be a cost to staying single for too long. Not because marriage is superior, but because intimacy is a skill. It's a muscle. And when life is optimized entirely around independence, the nervous system can start learning one rule. Nothing gets close enough to disturb my peace. That's when freedom can harden into rigidity. Patience shortens. Tolerance for conflict drops. The ability to repair after rupture weakens. And without noticing, solitude stops being medicine and starts becoming a beautifully silent cage. So what do we do with all of this? Because choosing not to marry isn't automatically healthy, and it isn't automatically broken either. The difference isn't the decision, it's the reason underneath it. There are 3 questions that cut straight through the noise. First, when intimacy approaches, do you feel calm or constricted? If closeness feels grounding, that's autonomy. If it feels suffocating, that's protection. Second, are you guarding your freedom, or are you guarding a wound? One allows growth, the other simply prevents pain. Third, if the right person appeared, truly safe, genuinely aligned, would you still turn away from commitment? If the answer is yes with clarity, that's choice. If the answer is yes with panic, that's trauma. The future of love isn't a single template. For some, marriage still fits. For others, the healthiest bond may look like long-term partnership without contracts, living separately, staying child-free, or building chosen family instead. The goal isn't tradition, it's alignment. The real task is to build a life that doesn't require your nervous system to stay in survival mode just to participate in it.